This is Tim Bryce with my column entitled The Problem with Cold Calls. When we started our company years ago, we relied heavily on cold calls, initial telephone contacts with prospective purchasers of our products. To do so, we carefully created a list of potential candidates, rehearsed a speech, and made the call. Actually, it wasn't quite that simple. We spent considerable time researching company backgrounds by geographical regions, including its financial standing, thanks to Forbes and Standard & Poor's directories. As we are in the systems business, we were very much interested in the type of computer hardware and software they used, which we found through various computer-related directories. Finally, we located the main contacts by job title, such as MIS or IS Director and Systems Manager. This was well before the advent of such titles as IT. If we knew people familiar with the candidates, we would contact them first as a pre-investigation. In other words, we did our homework in order to locate the most qualified candidates, thereby maximizing our chances for success. Only then would we make the call. Later, as we began to use advertising and articles were written about us, people would contact us. These candidates were also checked out accordingly before we mailed promotional literature. Prior to making the initial cold call, we prepared a simple script that would touch on the key benefits in a short amount of time. If the prospect wanted to know more, we would be happy to elaborate, but our intent was to get our foot in the door and schedule a presentation. We also learned there were good and bad times to make a cold call. In the mornings, we found 10 a.m. to 11:30 a.m. were the best times to call a prospect. Most people do not want to be bothered first thing in the morning as they are starting their day, which is why we avoided the 8:30 a.m. to 10 a.m. time frame. Also, we discovered executives like to leave early for lunch and couldn't concentrate if they were running for an appointment or food. In the afternoon, we found 2 to 4 p.m. was the best time to call. From 1 p.m. to 2 p.m., managers were just returning from lunch and organizing the second half of their workday. Plus, they might be slightly groggy after consuming a meal. The 4 p.m. to 5 p.m. time frame was also considered bad timing, as people were tidying up loose ends before departing for the day. Further, we only made calls on Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays. Mondays were considered busy startup days, and Fridays were burnout days. I suspect little has changed in this regards in corporate America. Getting past the secretary was also a challenge, but we found if we introduced ourselves properly and honestly told of the nature of our call, the secretary would tell us when to call back. We also found a little professional courtesy went a long way in those days. Cold calls are much more difficult to make today as opposed to yesteryear. For example, secretaries have become an endangered species. It is also ironic that despite the sophisticated communication devices we have invented, it seems nobody answers the phone anymore, allowing messages to go to voicemail, which is inevitably deleted without being heard. Frankly, I don't know how telemarketers today make such calls for their clientele. I have a friend who sells solar water heating systems. His company depends on telemarketers who canvass for candidates and makes appointments for the sales force. Evidently, they do not qualify the candidates very well, and it is not uncommon for the salesman to arrive at the scheduled time only to find the appointee is either puzzled as to the purpose of the meeting or lacks the necessary finances to purchase the product. In other words, the sales force travels an inordinate amount of miles to make their calls at their own expense. Further, their chances for success are a measly 10% or possibly lower. Instead of properly qualifying candidates, the telemarketers are playing a numbers game at the expense of the sales force. This means true cold calling, as we knew it years ago, is an ineffective means of marketing products. Your alternatives today are either making such calls in person at the customer site, which can be an expensive and time-consuming proposition, or relying on spam emails, which has its own set of problems. As to direct mail through the post office, that disappeared with the 20th century. Friends, keep the faith. This is Tim Bryce in Palm Harbor, Florida. Follow me on the internet at timbryce.com.